Good evening, everybody. Welcome backstage crew here as we're about to start broadcasting and get moving. Glad you guys could join us today. And we're about to start the outward broadcast here. I think we should be good. Actually, can I get quick audio checks from you two?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, very good. Okay, I think we're okay. All right, very good. Very good. So let me cue up our little intro sequence here. The nice thing is that Phil has made all of this lovely music for me to include in our intro sequence. So, all right, I'm gonna start that up and then we will go in 17 seconds. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hello, and we're back after our July hiatus with another Silmarillion film project. And for those of you joining us for our live stream, remember it's now a live stream, not just a podcast. For you, those of you joining us for a live stream, thank you for choosing to watch this instead of the Olympics. You made the right choice.
That's right. That's right.
I'm your co-host, Dave Kale, and I'm joined as always by the Tolkien professor, Corey Olsen, and one of our head writers, Nick Palazzo, is here with us tonight. And we are continuing on with part 2 of probably 10 of episode 10.
That's right.
The episode that just keeps going. But hopefully we're going to get to Fingolfin's vision tonight, like one of the most exciting topics of this season, I think.
Yes, Marie has just clarified this is part 2 of 2, clearly.
Oh, okay.
So,
Right.
yes, I think it's pretty clear where. But yeah, today is a really interesting one because, of course, it's time to buckle down and everybody get on the same page about this whole Fingolfin's vision thing.
Yes.
We'll come back to kind of setting this up. We'll set up where we started from, where kind of recap where our thinking on this started like 6 months ago, and then we'll have Nick explain to us where their thinking went since then, and see if we can't meet together over this here at some point. But first, quick announcements. First, we have exciting Signum University news today. That was so today, the bill which officially recognized Signum University in New Hampshire law was signed into law by the governor of the state of New Hampshire. In fact, I have right here the what's the word again?
Gubernatorial?
Gubernatorial pen? Yeah. The gubernatorial pen, which the word governor has such a delightful adjectival form. The gubernatorial, there's an extra syllable in there. The gubernatorial pen with which the Signum bill was signed. Very, very, very exciting.
Man, congratulations! That's
thank you. Yes, we've officially been welcomed into the Society of New Hampshire universities. It's the tradition in New Hampshire, all universities have to be recognized by an act of Congress in the state, which is less fun than it sounds, as it turns out, but it is complete, and it is a very, very exciting day. So yes, we had a little signing ceremony down at the governor's office this afternoon, and it was lovely, followed by celebratory drinks down the pub with several of our legislative supporters and friends. So this is a wonderful day for Signum University, the end of a unexpectedly long. And of course, you know, needless to say, the pandemic breaking out in the middle did not make that any easier, but it's all done. That is all done now. And we are officially entered into New Hampshire law. So very fun day for Signum today. Other quick announcement is that regional moots have begun again. New England moot and Middle moot are officially scheduled. New England moot is happening on the 25th of September, that's Saturday, September 25th, and that's going to be in Durham, New Hampshire. And then Middle moot is happening out in Waterloo, Iowa on October 9th. So if you are in the middle of the country or out here up in the Northeast, you should put those dates on your calendars, and we will definitely be. I am so looking forward to seeing folks again for regional moots this year. We are doing all of our regional moots this year as fully hybrid moots, so people will be able to attend digitally as well as coming in person. So just wanted to make sure to let everybody know about those things. Registration should be open fairly soon. We should have, certainly by the time of our next session, we'll have registration links and everything open for that, but wanted to definitely announce the dates. Brian was wondering if any moots in Japan are in the works. Actually, Brian, yeah. In fact, it's one of the manifold tragedies of the pandemic that we were all scheduled for September of 2020 to have our first ever Nippon moot. We had it all scheduled and ready to go. I was about to buy my plane tickets, in fact, and then that didn't happen. So yeah, we ended up having to cancel Nippon moot, but we are definitely hoping to do that again sometime soon. So it would have been our first Asian moot, and I'm hoping we get to do that again sometime soon. So anyway, yeah, so that's it's happening, but not quite yet. All right, and then of course our Signum clubs are continuing. Our Signum clubs have been wonderful. We've been running those now for a number of months, and we have we've got kids studying Old English. We've got kids doing creative writing. We've got book clubs going on. We have a number of conversation club languages that we're opening now, in addition to Spanish and German. We also have Gaelic, and we have Japanese. It's a really, really fun time to get involved in Signum clubs. And I would say in particular for homeschoolers who are getting ready soon to start gearing up, Signum clubs is a really, really wonderful way to supplement homeschool curriculum. In particular, I know how difficult it can be for homeschoolers to get really good language instruction. You can do a lot of language stuff online, of course, that is sort of passively online, but being able to get together in a group of people to do conversational immersion, in real time in foreign languages, both historical languages and modern languages, can be really challenging. And we have about 14 different language options available through Signum Club. So would love to talk with folks and figure out how we can help homeschoolers. That's something that we would really love to do. So if you are doing homeschooling and would be interested in this, we're doing from grades 3 through 12 in our clubs program. Definitely get in touch with us. Cool. Anyway, let us move back into episode 10 now. So what we did succeed in last session was talking about the A-plot, going through Aredhel and Maegwyn's arrival in Gondolin. And we spent a good deal of time thinking through, this is the big scene, right? This is the end of Aredhel's storyline. And we talked about the execution of Eol and everything. We didn't talk about we didn't talk much about sort of where Maegwyn ended up at the very end, but that's, I think, just as well, because of course we don't really know. We're kind of be picking up with him. Meanwhile, what has Maegwyn been up to in Gondolin will be a story for another time. But what we did not get to was the B and the C plot. And the C plot is, of course, where a lot of our attention is focused here in this discussion, the issue of Fingolfin. I did say, Nick, well, I mean, I said it last time to Marie, and I'll say it to you also. I love the way that the B and the C plot come together here, the way that the marriage, the weddings, kind of parallel and provide a kind of both a parallel and a sort of a premise for the discussions there. You know, the re-examination a generation on of the connection between the Edain and the Eldar, I think is really, really interesting, and I really liked how that worked. Let's look at the B plot, because I don't want to forget about it. It's in the midst of talking about the Fingolfin stuff. So, Nick, what are some of the things you would emphasize about the double wedding storyline itself?
Well, there's a few things about this that we wanted to make sure that we hit on, because it would be very easy for the double wedding to kind of fade into just kind of background noise for what Fingolfin's doing, which would kind of cause us to really lose sight of the human element of what's happening here. There's certainly a human element. The arrival of humans is part of what is part of the change that is driving Fingolfin forward in the direction he's currently trying to go in. And so to lose sight of them, to just make them the backdrop for Fingolfin's story, we felt would kind of be a mistake, right? Especially when we have opportunities to get some of our major characters from the various houses of men in the same conversation. Like, if you have an opportunity to have Haleth and Hador and Andreth in the same room having a conversation, you take that opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just that that line, I was just kind of staring at that line of text, meeting of Haleth, Hador, and Andreth, and I'm like, man, that's quite something, actually.
Yeah.
It's really neat.
Yeah. And Andreth, as likely the most learned human available, is the officiant for the wedding, which you know, like at first it was like, we might be just kind of bringing her in just to do it, which kind of might look a little hokey. But that, I mean, who would you choose?
Right.
Right. I mean, she's a neutral party. She's not part of either of those two houses. She's not an elf and therefore not removed from the concept of human marriage. And I really like the idea of her officiating this wedding just after we saw her romance fall apart.
Yeah, well, there's certainly an additional poignancy to it for that reason. But no, I like it. I mean, yes, of course, on the one hand, you know, Andreth is not directly involved, but there's this whole situation has an almost sort of quasi Merith Atherthod feeling about it, right? This is like the Merith Atherthod of the men. Now, it's not unlike the Merith Atherthod. It's not designed to like ease tensions and everything. It's you know, it's not like, but it is. This is like a family reunion, right? It's the only family reunion that the Edain are going to get. I mean, it's not even a reunion. It's just a union, right? I mean, they never were together all in one place before. And so, especially after we have invested quite a lot, you know, in this season, sort of showing these different, you know, kindreds of the Edain and the different kind of paths that they have walked. We've explored through them, you know, not only three different, you know, ways in which they're connected to the elves and in which they're related to the events of Beleriand, but even within each one, it has changed and developed in various ways. So there's been a lot that's kind of happened here. And so bringing them all together before everything gets shattered at the end, seems like a really, really good idea. And you know, and so fortunately, we didn't have to like invent an occasion. An occasion really presents itself that offers the opportunity to bring everybody together. So I think that's perfect. I think that's perfect. Yeah.
We were moderately concerned about the fact that there really isn't kind of a threaded story in this kind of section of the plot, but given that it's really like we have it down as the B plot, the reality is it's more of a C plot anyway, and it's kind of just threaded through, and it is partially in the background of Fingolfin's story, so we're getting pieces, right? We're getting kind of chapters here rather than we're getting kind of like mini episodes throughout the episode, which given the context of this, I think is fine. We're coming towards the end of the season, so these are kind of our last chances to get to know some of these people. We're introduced to Barahir, Galdor, Gundor. Galdor and Gundor we intend to have an expanded role in the following episode. As kind of the representatives of humans along the way there. And of course, all three of those guys are going to have a role to play in the Dagor Bragollach itself.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Ilana asks a great question. Did you discuss how the marriages were arranged? Were these political matches? Were they like, you know, how did that come out?
So the reality is, so we did not actually work that out on the outlining level, right? The reality is, based on the text, they probably arranged marriages.
Kind of sounds like it, yeah. I mean, it has that sense.
But if Galdor and Gundor are brothers who are marrying into the House of Halath, it's not unreasonable to come to the conclusion that the two of them were traveling together and traveled through the lands of Brethil and met people, right? Like that's not unreasonable to have happened. So
we're not doing the foster child thing yet, right?
Not yet.
Not yet. Right.
So the relationship just isn't there yet.
Right. But this, of course, is the event that's going to kind of pave the way for that, right? This, you know, that kind of exchange of sons being fostered, you know, by the lords of other lands.
Apparently, sending your young people to learn from the Haladin is a thing you do in
Valerian. Yeah, exactly. They are the finishing school of the Edain, obviously. Yeah, exactly. So no, I mean, I think that makes sense. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. As Maria's pointing out, those kids, the kids who are going to be fostered out, are the result of this marriage. So, so Galdor's sons, right, Hurin and Huor, are going to be sent as fosterlings to Brethil.
Yeah.
Later. Yeah.
And sorry, Gundor is not one of the people getting married here. But it's but
right.
You know, things happen.
Right. Yes, exactly.
If we were really concentrating on telling that story, we could explain how this all happened. If we want it to be an arranged marriage, to show that that's a thing humans do, which again is elves don't do that. It would illustrate another difference in how humans think. We could certainly do that, and it would fit right in. It's certainly the easiest way to explain this without having a lot of backstory exposited on the screen.
Right. But even, you know, the fact that this is an interesting place, and it's another thing that made me think about the Marath Adderthad, actually, is that they would even have political marriages between the different houses of the Edain is totally not a given. Like that's kind of an interesting move on their part. It's like they are, and again, it's what I like about this gathering and about celebrating this gathering and showing this gathering on screen, is that the idea that they're going to stick together in some ways, right? That they're going to be connected with each. It's not a given that they're going to have anything to do with each other. The three different houses of the Edain here, they weren't that so very closely related beforehand that is inevitable, and they're certainly far enough spread geographically that it needn't be inevitable in that way either. But it certainly is something that I think is a really interesting step, and that we see is going to be important for the future of the Edain. And the way that the Edain are going to be seen, the three houses of the Edain are going to be sort of more, as we go up through, of course, the Numenor period and stuff, bringing them together, I think is a really important stage. Yes, as Marie points out, it's arranged, not coerced. And that's really clear. I mean, even in the text, that's really clear. Well, by the text, I really mean the children of Hurin rather than the text of the published Silmarillion, which doesn't even give Glorethil's name. But we're told that, when her husband dies in the Dagor Bragollach, she perishes with grief. Or sorry, was it the Near-Ninth? No, it was the Dagor Bragollach, wasn't it? No, it was the Near-Ninth. Darn it. Okay. Anyway, like there was clearly much, much love grew within that marriage, and so it was definitely not just like a marriage of political convenience or something like that, even if it was in its origin.
Right. And if surveys are any indication, marriages of that sort where maybe they're not initiated by the marriers, even if they are not initiated by them, that still works out to be a good, healthy relationship in a lot of cases, if statistics are to be believed in that case.
Right. Yeah. Now, Brian is asking, are we given to understand that this is maybe the first instance of such a thing, of these arranged marriages? Of course, marriages individually might be arranged, perhaps within their cultures in other ways, but this is certainly the first instance of this kind of binding the houses of the Edain together kinds of relationships, and that I think is the really important thing here. That's the step that's being taken. Again, that's why this gathering seems to me so interesting and so important. Okay. Yes, and I do have to admit that I was rather surprised by the surprise guest at the wedding. Was not expecting Gandalf to show up at the wedding. I really wasn't.
Yeah, so that is 100% understandable, and other people had some thoughts on that as well. And so I'm leery of addressing that issue without addressing the other larger issue. If that particular thing, aside from the larger issue, is something we want to talk about, we can, but just
no, I know it's connected to the larger issue, yeah. So
right.
That's more of a transitional point, I suppose.
Yes.
Yes. But yeah, so I mean, it's okay. Well, last thing then, before we leave the double wedding behind, Andreth, you talked about the sort of poignant irony of Andreth officiating the weddings, which presumably she's done many times since this. So it's not like, in that sense, it's not specially poignant for her, just for us as viewers, seeing her in that position after last we saw her standing by herself in the snow. How are we depicting Andreth? How has she changed? Are we I'm imagining, so like we're going to see in episode 11, which I'm keenly looking forward to. We're going to see in episode 11, I'm presuming, signs of the clear bitterness that Andreth still feels. But I'm guessing outwardly, she's not going to show that very much. I mean, again, we don't want to have her be so stoic that the viewers get no reminder whatsoever of the situation. But again, she's always been a good leader and is still a good leader of her people, and so therefore is certainly going to be celebrating with them at this time of celebration. And um, but yeah, I mean, how did you guys have thoughts about how to kind of manage Andreth's? She didn't get that many lines, does she? I mean, I only read the outline, of course, but I mean, she's not in a whole lot of scenes, as I recall.
Right. There's a scene where she meets up with Haleth, I believe, if memory serves. She's in the scene where our three human power players are meeting together, and then she's officiating the wedding. So during the actual wedding scene, she's the only one talking, so she gets a few lines there, right? You know, but
Oh yeah, I also go ahead.
And I was going to say that you know, there might be a little salt behind some of the choices of words that she uses during the ceremony, but you know.
Yeah, Marie was saying, you know, there would be some remarks about the difference in marriage between elves and men, and that some of them would be quite pointed. Yes. I can imagine her, a human woman officiating a human marriage primarily to a human audience, knowing there are the elf lords there in the audience, and saying some things like, marriage among the Edain is not as marriage among the Eldar, and you know, as you know, in the kind of like wedding homily sort of way, like you know, you like you do, right? Give a little homily about the significance of marriage and everything, right? Give some context there.
Yeah, like I can see some lines about the idea of marriage being a celebration of life, even in the face of adversity and certain death. You know, certainly setting the stage for the following episode.
Right. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Okay. No. So that's that would be a particularly fun speech to write, I would think, under the as that speech being a kind of bridge, right, between last episode and next episode. Yeah. So that's really fun. But for those of you who aren't tracking, episode 11, the next episode after this, so this is episode 10 of the season. Episode 11 is going to be the Athrobeth, basically the debate, the discussion between Finrod and Andreth. So that's the one that I'm really looking forward to. But yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about Fingolfin's vision. So this all began, and I still think that this is one of the biggest challenges of the entire season. I really do. I mean, this is a highly non-trivial thing, because the death of Fingolfin at the end of the season, you know, that's where we're going to end. It's going to be the culmination of season 5, is going to be the duel between Fingolfin and Morgoth, and Fingolfin's death. And this is, of course, a scene which is a favorite scene of many, right? Lots of Tolkien fans love the duel between Fingolfin and Morgoth, and it's marvelous and it's heroic, but it's also despairing. Fingolfin in a fey mood. It's Fingolfin in a fey mood. You know, you could read the text as that it's simply an act of despair, that Fingolfin is choosing an elaborate and dramatic way to commit suicide, essentially. And we're tackling this at the beginning, saying we don't want that. Like, that's the thing we want to avoid. The thing we want to avoid is having Fingolfin's assault on Angband simply be an act of despair, simply look like a suicide. The battle has gone against them. The defenses of the Noldor are shattered. The chances of their future victory in the war seem nil. His own family seems overwhelmed, and so Fingolfin, his high kingship in ruins, Fingolfin throws his life away in a last desperate, but not even really desperate, despairing, which is worse than desperate, solo attack. Just does what looks like an abdication of his kingship, right? I'm just going to get on a horse, leave behind all of my responsibilities and all of the people I'm supposed to be leading in this desperate hour, and instead just ride off by myself and go and attempt to kill Morgoth without much real hope of actual success. So anyway, this is exactly as Marie says, desperate means dire circumstances. Despair means giving up. Exactly. So our number one goal here always was, we want the death of Fingolfin to mean something. We want this to be meaningful. We want there to be something that he is accomplishing. We don't want this to be simply an act of despair, an abdication, and all those things. So this is precisely what we're trying to avoid. But it's challenging. It's challenging to do it just exactly. I mean, the text is as usual. I mean, it's the Silmarillion, right? So we don't get a whole lot of detail. We don't get an internal monologue from Fingolfin, right, telling us what he's thinking at this time. So what is he thinking? What is the context, and how do we make this work? So we suggested the idea that there was a vision, right? That there was an inspiration, and the original idea, I think it was my idea, at least it feels like my idea. Well, Dave came up with the concept, right? Dave, do you want to explain the concept, Dave?
To the extent that I can vaguely remember, I think the idea was to give him an Olmo style, like a vision that would sort of be very consistent with the messaging that Olmo had been sending to Fingolfin's family, particularly Turgon, in sort of a
yes,
don't give up. Your family is going to beat Morgoth. You need to trust in the West, etc. And just have it be one of those classic, sufficiently vague visions that the overeager person misinterprets and then goes off and does the wrong thing. But then, as the full story unfolds, the audience learns that it was correct all along. It wasn't wrong. It was just poorly timed. I think that's the short version of it, right?
Yeah. And the thing that I loved about this is that this seemed to be an opportunity to kind of do two things at once, right? On the one hand, we could kind of transform Fingolfin's end to sort of reshape it in those ways that we were talking about. But at the same time, it also enables us to bring in something which we're not, I think, going to do later on necessarily. Well, maybe we will, who knows? But and that is Olmo's message to Turgon, because as Dave was saying, what Olmo says to Turgon changes at different points, right? The message in the published Silmarillion, Olmo's message to Turgon is, okay, time, it's moving day, Turgon, right? Time to pull up stakes and get out, and don't forget, that your true hope lies in the West, beyond the sea. So don't stay in Gondolin, leave. But that, of course, was not the original message to Turgon. And the earlier texts, the earlier versions of the Gondolin story were much stronger than this. And what that first message to Turgon was that he was the chosen vessel. Like the message to Turgon was not flee, but attack, right? Turgon, if you open the Leaguer of Gondolin right now and you attack Morgoth, you will win. It doesn't look like you can possibly win, right? This is an act in defiance of apparent reality, right? I mean, because always the initial concept of the fall of Gondolin, back when it was the very first story Tolkien had written, like there was no other history at the time when he wrote the fall of Gondolin. It was the first of the Silmarillion stories that he wrote, and yet, even at that point, it was always the end of the story. Right, the premise of the Fall of Gondolin story, back when there were no other Silmarillion stories at all, was still the power of Morgoth had covered the land, and all of the places of the Eldar had fallen, and only Gondolin remains as the last hope and sanctuary of the elves. And Morgoth's, apparently overwhelming power is controlling all of the rest of the continent, and the only reason Gondolin survives is because of its secrecy, and it alone, contains the last hope of elves, right? Because it's the last refuge, and it's in that context that Olmo delivers this message to Turgon. Okay, I want you not only to open the gates of your refuge, I want you to march out and attack the opponent who seems completely unassailable, right? And Olmo promises him that if he does, Olmo is going to deliver the Valar to come in on their side. Like the West will come and you will win. Morgoth is going to be thrown down, and light will triumph in the darkness if you do this. So Turgon never, in any version of the story, does what Olmo tells him to do. No matter what Olmo tells him to do, Turgon doesn't do it. So Turgon doesn't march out in the original version, and instead stays within his gates, right? Which is not the arrogant thing to do. It's the prudent, cautious thing to do, right? We're safe here. I have a responsibility as the keeper of the last hope and refuge of elves, right? If we rashly march out to what appears to be certain doom, then we're throwing everything away, right? It is an act of faith, ultimately, that Olmo is asking of him, in defiance of like what reason would seem to tell you, right? And indeed, it's not a rational hope that Olmo gives. He doesn't say, you're underdogs, Turgon, but I like your odds, right? That's not Olmo's message. Olmo's message is a eucatastrophe will occur if you march out, right? But if you don't, it won't. And he doesn't, and it doesn't. So that's the original message of Olmo to Turgon, and I love that message. And by the way, there are still places in the text, in the published text, where you can hear it. The primary one is that place where it mentions where the text describes how Morgoth was always like, why he was particularly obsessed with Turgon, how even in Valinor, when they were there together, when Turgon, walked by, he felt a chill of doom on his own heart, right? Foreboding that in some distant day, destruction would come to him through Turgon. And in the published text, the only thing that we're left with as a payoff for that passage is like the fact that Aredhel, who is the grandson of Turgon, is going to be the one who takes the message into the West and brings about, which precipitates the War of Wrath, which brings down Morgoth, which is not a good payoff. It's kind of lame, actually. I always thought it was lame. Like long before I had read the Book of Lost Tales, I thought that was kind of lame. And I was like, gosh, there's all this setup, you know, for Turgon, and then Turgon just blows it, nothing happens, right? What's even up with that? So it was one of those things. There are a few moments when, you know, when I finally went back and I read the Book of Lost Tales and all those earlier things, there are a few moments that I can kind of point to where I was, that I found really satisfying, right? You know, that really kind of seemed to answer questions that I'd always had, and that's really one of the strongest examples of that. So anyway, that's so the idea of bringing this element in, and so I loved the idea of marrying these two things together, right? The attack of Fingolfin and this kind of vision, right? This this foreboding that, because you see, it planted the potential seed. It gave a really interesting explanation for how is it that Fingolfin could go on a solo assault against Morgoth and yet have it not be an act of suicide. Anyway, so that was the concept that we talked about way back when. Now, tell us how things went from there, Nick.
Okay. So, as you guys may have been aware, there was a little bit of pushback on this from a lot of people. In fact, this was probably the biggest amount of pushback I've seen on the boards over a decision made since season 1.
Since season 1, right.
We don't have to talk about that one. Yeah. There have been other issues which have come pretty close. You know, the Balrogs at the Dagor Agloreb, the characterization of Fingolfin way back in season 2, right?
Yes.
But this
was Fingolfin as an annoying twerp concept.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was definitely Lamps level pushback. So we set to work because there were some problems, right?
Okay.
There's some problems with Olmo being the source of this, which I can get into. But there's a reason why if we're going to do this, if you attack Morgoth, then you will win, and I will deliver the Valar, works better with Turgon than it does with Fingolfin. Mostly because Turgon does nothing. Right? If Fingolfin believes that the Valar will be delivered to help them if he pursues an all-out attack on Angband, and then that never happens, so he decides that he's going to depend on the grace of the Valar and throw himself at Morgoth anyway, and then the Valar do not reward that act of faith. Nobody looks good. The Valar look petty and kind of gross for letting him do that. Fingolfin looks like a dope, right, for believing that they would come and help him. Like, there's this whole host of other issues that, like, he's either a dope for misinterpreting what they told him, or his faith in their grace is completely misplaced.
Right.
And we've kind of been setting up a lot of this stuff since way back in season 2, because in season 2 we did the thing, we showed Turgon having a special place in, you know, in Morgoth's neuroticism, right? We then showed in season 3, we showed Ellenway before her death, foreseeing that from the house of Fingolfin will come the downfall of Morgoth. Right. Also, Morgoth helped Fingolfin forge his first sword in the attempt to foment rebellion against the Valar, right? So there are already reasons baked in why Fingolfin would maybe not necessarily think that it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to die by facing Morgoth. And in fact, that's vindicated by the fact that he injures Morgoth and does not immediately die.
Right. It is not in fact so utterly one-sided a combat as it initially might seem.
Right. And also we have to remember that just because Fingolfin enters into that situation with one attitude does not necessarily mean that that entire fight he has to maintain that same attitude throughout the whole thing. Because as he gains some, even if we did the whole suicide by Morgoth thing to get him there, even if we did, which I'm not suggesting we do, but even if we did, we could still create an arc through that fight where at first he sees that, wow, I'm actually doing surprisingly well here, right? This is actually also kind of fun. But as he tires, it starts to turn into this kind of realization of what is happening there. At the kind of a realization that he is living in a mythic moment, you know, where he realizes that the very act of wounding Morgoth in the face of all of his guys has an impact moving forward, not only on Morgoth, but also on the morale of his forces and the morale of Fingolfin's people as well. So even if we decided to go with the suicide by Morgoth entry into that, the solution to me was always in the portrayal of the fight itself.
Right.
But we don't have to go with the suicide by Morgoth, because the vision itself can create this, can give him all the information that we're looking to give him. That Morgoth is not unassailable, that the true hope is going to come from the west, but you're running out of time. You know?
Right.
And by giving that message to Laurent, it allowed us a certain level of plausible deniability where it's not clear where that message comes from, or whether Laurent himself even really knows what the intent of that message is.
So you're making Gandalf unreliable rather than the Valar.
Gandalf is super unreliable. He's super unreliable. He does that sort of stuff all the time. He puts people in dangerous situations and things just work out. He doesn't know that it's going to work that way.
Right. So it's the choosing of Bilbo all over again, is what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. So I'm torn here because on the one hand, I am really tempted to respond to the critiques of the original vision idea, because there are obvious answers to these problems. I mean, I absolutely acknowledge the problems that people are raising, and I agree that if it were done in that particular way, that would be the result. Of like making Fingolfin look like an idiot, or the Valar looking unreliable. I don't consider that inescapable at all. And the way that I had always envisioned it myself led to not tragedy, right? Tragedy, but not scorn, I think, on either side. But yeah. So Maria's saying one thing I said repeatedly way back when in session. Maria's reminding us, by the way, that session 2, which is when we talked about this, was in April 2020. It was 15 months ago, in fact. So that is quite some time ago. But anyway, back then, Maria said what I said repeatedly was Morgoth is not unassailable. And so that was really kind of the key to what you guys were talking about both the vision and the duel, right? The primary thing that Fingolfin accomplishes is that, and that I agree is a really that certainly as a consequence of it, I think is excellent. Well, but instead of rebutting at length, let us instead move forward and talk about what you guys have proposed in a little bit more detail, so that we can oops, no, not that. So so tell me, so you put Aloran as the intermediary, right? Which I also really kind of like, by the way. Having Aloran be involved. Aloran I keep calling him Gandalf. I know he's not Gandalf yet. I'm calling him Gandalf just to remind viewers that this is, he who shall be called Gandalf that we're talking about here. But he is not yet Gandalf because he's not yet incarnate as the Istari who's going to show up in the Third Age. But we're talking about the same dude, and so the idea that we know almost nothing. I mean, we know a little. We get one paragraph about Aloran's earlier career, right? And well, I say his earlier career, his like interests and affinities, right, and sort of character. We learn a little bit. That's really what we're not told. A plot line, right, of what he does or where he ends up being. So therefore, I have no objection whatsoever to having him appear in various places, especially so when the actions that he's performing are consistent with what we're told about his character and what he does, right? And bringing a vision that seems very much in keeping for Aloran and the kind of thing he would do.
Also, it was our only touchstone between the frame and the main story. In most of our stories thus far, with one exception, there have been people who are in both places.
Right.
In season 2, season 3, not so much season 3. I guess you see Elrond in it, but he's not there yet either. So but it's very common for us to have some sort of connection between the two, and this was really our only opportunity to do that. The big controversy on the boards about the use of Aloran was his physical presence at the wedding itself, which is something that we felt maybe we could do without it, but it would have him come out of nowhere. Like, who is this guy?
He'd look like a genie or something popping out.
Right. Right. Whereas if we see him periodically through the episode, people could be going, wait, that guy looks familiar. And then after we see him wait, no, that's Aloran, that's Gandalf, right?
Right.
So if we take time out to point out to the audience who, like, this guy, he's important. Hey, this guy, remember this guy? Remember this guy? Right. And then when we show him in the vision, it's a little bit less out of nowhere.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. It does. So yeah, no, I'm fine with that. And we do know that he does, as Marie is quoting, he walks among the elves, right? And that's one of the few things that we're told. So, I mean, it's never absolutely stated that he does so in Middle Earth, right? But hey, that's fine. Like, I don't. We know that some of the Maiar are here in Middle Earth, so that seems legit. And I do like the fact, and one of the things that probably the single point on which I was feeling most uneasy about the original vision plan was that I don't want to overdo the and then Olmo sends another dream, right, by a river or something. Like, we just did that last season, of course, with Gondolin. And so that was one concern that I had anyway, was I didn't want to beat on that particular drum too many times. So this to me is a really is an elegant solution to that, and a fun solution to that. I mean, hey, more Gandalf, like, who says no, right?
So Gandalf serving drinks to Hodor and Andreth. Like,
come on. Yeah. So he disguises himself as a cocktail waiter?
well, essentially, like he essentially is present in the scene,
Right.
in a few different scenes throughout the course of the wedding, right?
Yeah.
And then when he's there in the dream, you've seen him before, and if you don't have any idea who he was in the preceding scenes, you certainly know that he's important now, right?
Right. Yeah. No, and it's great. I like that. Michael, Dennis was asking, are we saying he's been in Middle Earth all along, or that he made a special trip from Valinor for this? I'm
We
thinking
don't.
special trip.
We're not
But,
saying
you know,
either of those things.
Right. We don't know.
I mean,
We have no idea.
yes, I agree that it is a special trip, but
Yeah.
the show is not
Show is not, it's right.
telling you that.
Yeah. It's not going to be clear.
Right.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that once we get to episode 13, that things will, like, when we tie all this together in the actual duel with Fingolfin,
Right.
I think that's when it's really going to start to hit home what's going on here.
Okay. So to contextualize the dream, right, the vision that he has, the context is his interaction with the men at the wedding, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that. And this was, as I said, this is one of the things that I really liked about the outline. I was really struck by in the outline was that the way the interaction between Fingon and Fingolfin when they're talking about men. Tell us a little bit more about what you were wanting to kind of establish there.
So with Fingolfin and Fingon, and this was again an issue that you guys brought up when you were talking about the vision, is the sense of abdication that Fingolfin is leaving his people leaderless. Sure, he's get Fingon, but there's no sense of heir apparent for the elves, because there's no expectation that you're going to need one. Right? Which is why we set up back. See, of course, the benefit of having structured the season the way that we have is that after you guys brought that up, we had the entire season of episodes to lay the groundwork to get us to this point, where it's now no longer a serious problem that Fingolfin leaves his people, because he learned from men, as he's been doing all along, and that's another part of this that we really wanted to drive home is that the men, while Laurent is the one giving the vision, the men are a heavy source of this realization and have been all along, and that the influence of humans on Fingolfin is steady throughout the season, and gets us, because it's not just okay. Did you see the movie The Alamo with Billy Bob Thornton in it?
I didn't.
Oh, it's so good.
No.
So good. There's so the entire time, Davy Crockett, you're familiar with the story of The Alamo, though. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
The entire time, Davy Crockett is kind of wrestling with the idea of his own legend, because this is a man clearly trapped by his own legend. He even says during the course of the movie, if I was just simple David from Tennessee, I might hop over that wall and take my chances. That Davy Crockett guy, like these guys are looking at him, right?
Right.
And in the final moments of the battle, Davy Crockett and some of his guys are like holed up in the church at the far end of the Alamo, and the Mexican army is beating on the door trying to get in. And you can tell, like, that Davy Crockett is physically exhausted, but realizes that this is not going to work out. And the smart thing to do would be to surrender and survive, right? But then he looks down, and huddled in a corner of the church is this little kid who's been there this whole time, just staring at him. And he realizes, I'm Davy Crockett. I can't do that.
Right.
I can't do that to this little kid. Right. which in a way, Fingolfin becomes this mythic hero to us, to humans, through his actions. He inspires us, right?
Right.
And that's a part of this as well, right? And so that steady absorption of, on Fingolfin's part, of ideas from humanity is what gets him to his final destination at the end of the season. And so his interaction with Fingon in this episode is about his preparation for the big push, certainly, but also it's still part of his helping along of Fingon on his journey to high kingship. Because Fingolfin's got a dangerous job. Like, he's leading these guys into battle, which means that every time he goes into battle, he's at serious risk for death, right? Maybe not as much risk as going toe-to-toe with Morgoth.
Not as much risk as he's going to do later on, right?
Quite as much, but still substantial risk.
Right. You know, can I just pause for a second to observe how delightful is the irony of this whole situation that we've created? Right. I mean, we've created this situation where it's the advent of it's the coming of mortal, like from mortals. Fingolfin is learning to take the long view on things, right? I mean, you think if there was one thing the elves did not need to learn from humans, it would be how to, take the long view on things and think about continuity. I mean, continuity, not their problem, right? That's not something the elves struggle with. And thinking about how can we, sort of maintain things into the future, not a source of anxiety for elves, right? And so I love the idea that we see Fingolfin learning from the humans a new perspective on something which is itself like an obvious sort of strength, even in many cases would seem like an inevitability of the Eldar, and yet for that very reason, this is something that they neglect. So I do love the way that this is sort of set up, right? Like Fingolfin, from way back in the Beor scenes at the beginning of the season, Fingolfin is prompted to think of this idea of, I shall die. Gone. Yes, I shall die, and I need to make sure that when I die, after me, things are prepared. And it's true, like elves just don't think that way. I mean, it is an absolutely unnatural way in many ways for the Eldar to think. And yet Fingolfin is entirely right. Like, it's very wise of Fingolfin to think, for exactly as you said, Nick, because no, he's not going to die of old age, but he's going to have opportunity after opportunity to die by violence during the, especially since, as we established early on, the entire job, like what it means to be High King, is to be the military leader of the people. And so,
and slain he may be, and slain he shall be.
He shall like be. Absolutely.
Told him.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And it's interesting because the elves, like, they could always do something later. They could always do it later, right? Whereas we, at least at some point in our lives, start to realize later might never get here.
Right.
So I might have to do this now. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I love that. And I agree that this, we have, the whole season so far has done a really wonderful job of doing. And can I also say, like, one of the things that I occasionally have felt a little bit guilty about is that, we decided at the beginning of the season that change was going to be the sort of the theme of the season this year. We haven't discussed that much. Like, it hasn't, we haven't kept bringing that back. We haven't kept bringing, and yet actually I think we've accomplished it really well. I mean, this is a really fascinating example of the way in which change has come, right? And we see Fingolfin. And again, I love the way that we have set Fingolfin up as one of the positive exemplars, right? Of all of the Eldar in Beleriand in this season, Fingolfin is on the forefront of those who get it, right? Who are embracing change, who realize that not only do we have to be ready for when change might come in the future, like my death and Fingon's succession, but really kind of embrace the very fact that he is adapting the Eldar on the model of the Edain in this way shows that he kind of gets the fact that like that's the way things roll in Middle Earth, right? The Edain are more in touch with the way that the world works now, the way that Middle Earth works now than the Eldar are. And so therefore it is, if he wants to be a good leader of his people, the best thing to do, the way to approach that is to learn from the Edain rather than just to teach them. And this, of course, you could say was Finrod's mistake, right, with the people of Beor. He was a friend to them, right? He was kind to them. He was generous to them, but he didn't learn from. He sought only to teach and not to learn, right, from them. Whereas Fingolfin has been doing the opposite from the beginning there, and I love that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, Finrod's not going to get to that until next episode, really.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
He's not going to arrive at that point where he understands. Oh, we're supposed to learn from each other.
Right.
Oh, Iluvatar had a plan.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, that's going to be so much fun. But okay. All right. So, so with all that stuff in the background, right, and related to, again, like once again, he's watching like the generations of humanity moving forward, right, and now fully primed for this, right? He's now looking at aged Haleth and aging Hador, and the younger generation getting married and rising up, and he's now sagely nodding along with this, right? He gets this and understands and appreciates how this works.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me how the dream works into this. And I hang on first, I just want to touch on Alana's point. It does show a great deal of humility on Fingolfin's part.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important and interesting thing about the way that we have been characterizing Fingolfin here.
Right. And it's character growth from because his original real starting point is pride, right? That's
right.
his, like, one of the first scenes in which we're introduced to adult Fingolfin is way back in season 2. He's involved in because we had the idea, well, if the Noldor have weapons, they're going to want to learn how to use them, and so they might have some sort of sporting events. You know, they may have sporting combat that they go through, which, you know, like there are certain members among the Valor who would approve of that. I mean, Tulkas is certainly, like he's probably got season tickets. Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, why would she? Of course. Sure. And Fingolfin interacting with, I think it was Fingin. It may have been Fingin. I don't remember exactly who was. One of his sons is there with him and kind of like cheers when he wins. And Fingolfin kind of admonishes him about, no, this is just a game. We're just having fun, and you know, we're not looking to kill anybody. But I totally would have had him, kind of like that kind of
right.
That's how he begins his journey, essentially, right? And from that point to this is this really interesting curve. You know, you have the moments on the Helcaraxa where he's really learning how to lead, and what that means. You know, to laugh louder over a poorer dinner than anybody else, right?
Yes. Absolutely, the King Loon School of Leadership. Yes.
It's still probably one of my favorite descriptions of what leadership is like. You know,
Me too. Yeah, no, it's one of, there are probably 3 or 4 literary passages that are often in my mind. I mean, now that I'm in a leadership position, you know, now that I'm leading an organization, there are 2 or 3 passages that are always in my mind when it comes to examples for leadership. And King Loon's speech at the end of the Horson's Boy is definitely one of my short list.
It's definitely one of the most, I think it's one of the greatest lessons I learned from that portion of the Chronicles of Narnia was that bit.
Absolutely. Okay, so in the context of this, and you guys mentioned that he's he's boasting about the effectiveness of the siege, right? He gives a speech about this.
Yeah, and when we say boasting, like it's not boasting on himself, right? It's
Right?
you
He's not
guys,
being arrogant. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like you guys have done this, and
Right.
and Hodor has played a huge role in this
Right.
situation. Here he is, father of the bride of one side of a marriage and the groom of the other. It's not often you can be
Right.
the father of the bride and the groom at the same wedding, but
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah. Agreed. No. Okay. So right. So he's doing this to both to express, as Marie says to the men, don't worry, you're safe, right? But also to acknowledge like the significant contributions, that they have made, that the men have made, right? That
right.
we're all in this together, and yeah. So it's more of it's, as you say, it's not a boast in the sense of bragging on himself or being arrogant, but rather
Mhm.
again showing good leadership and bringing everyone together and praising everybody.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then he has his dream, right? So then Lauren brings the dream. So tell me about the dream.
Okay. So when we had envisioned this, we talked a lot about what we should do, because here's the problem. It can't be so vague that it could mean almost anything,
Right.
but it can't give him specific instructions that he is either going to do and still fail or not do, and we don't know what happened, right? So we wanted to make sure that we were giving him messaging that was getting him to where he needed to be. And so having Lauren basically talking to him conversationally seemed to us the best way to handle that. But having it feel like just a normal conversation, right? In the way that as if they already knew each other without Fingolfin actually know to whom he's talking.
Okay. So he's not aware of Lauren's presence?
He's aware of Lauren's presence, but he's not aware of who he is.
He doesn't know his identity. Okay.
Right. Right. Now, of course, you can make the case that, well, how could he not recognize him? Just because we see the same actor and we know who that is doesn't necessarily mean that the character in a dream recognizes him.
Right. Right. Michael is asking about sort of two-way dreams. We could call it fairy and drama, Michael. This idea there is, so we don't see this happening in the text. The dreams that we get in the text are fairly isolated. They do tend to be, when we get a sort of a message delivering dream, it tends to be kind of one directional. But I think that we've kind of prepared for this by having a Lauren present, right? The idea that even Elvish art and presumably Maiar art as well is capable of creating this dream state in which you are interacting with the with the artistic work. So again, fairy and drama, it's a phrase from Tolkien's On Fairy Stories, when he talks about like the theoretical pinnacle of artistic achievement, right? The theoretical pinnacle of artistic achievement is when you are like actually sensibly transported into the artistic world. So it's not just that you metaphorically lose yourself in a story or immerse yourself in a story. Your own waking senses are surrounded by and interacting with the artistic story of those, and that's how he characterizes the enchantment of the elves.
So a holodeck.
Yeah, basically that's what elves are capable of. Yeah, exactly. The holodeck is a mere poor mechanical substitute
yes.
but yes, I'd actually, especially the way that through particularly through Deep Space Nine and Voyager. They talk about holonovels and things like that. You know, that is very much a kind of mechanical replacement for that's fairy and drama, mechanically derived. So that is the thing. So this is what I like about Aloran being there. When you have like a dream message being sent from like Olmo or somebody, right? It does tend to be just one-sided, right? You know, you like the dream that Boromir describes, right? With the light in the west and the voice that sings the verse that brings him to Imladris to get an explanation of it, right? That's the way that kind of dream tends to work. But if Aloran is there, right? If the dream itself is not something sent from afar, but if Aloran is there and he is in this way enchanting Fingolfin, there's no reason why they can't both interact that way. So seems legit from a Tolkienian standpoint in that way.
Yep. And of course, Fingolfin's not the only one who's getting a certain amount of premonition involved here. Fingon is going to be aware of Aredhel's death. Right. Now, of course, Fingolfin might also be aware of it, but chalk it up to like this weird sense of foreboding that he just got from this dream, right? So he may not necessarily be able to filter it out of the background noise. And Fingon's reaction to Aredhel's death is muted. Our intention is to show a much stronger reaction to Aignor and Angrad's death on the part of like Finrod and Galadriel, because they're leaps and bounds further ahead of most of the Eldar when it comes to like awareness of the connection between them, right?
Right.
So
okay. So let's go over the content of the dream again, the dream conversation. Aloran tells him that change can be an opportunity for hope. True hope lies in the West and in the union of men with the Noldor. That's a really interesting point there. I mean, obviously we're setting up several. I mean, we're going to start with Beren and Luthien next season, of course, which is going to solidify the idea of hope lying in the union of men and the Noldor, you know, men and elves. But of course, we're also obviously setting the groundwork for Earendel as well.
Right.
Golfin's time is short. The siege will not last, but Morgoth is not unassailable. So he's predicting Fingolfin's death.
Maybe.
Sort of. Maybe.
Because Fingolfin's not the only one who assails Morgoth, right?
Right.
So what we're doing is creating the situation where we're not aware of how much Aloran himself knows about what's about to happen, right? Whereas if we give this to Olmo, we kind of expect him to know everything that's happening in the future, because he's got Tour's measurements, for crying out loud. Like he's right. That's not what we're talking about here. By giving this language to Aloran, he is predicting a whole bunch of stuff, but we don't know, and he may not know how much of it he actually knows, right?
Right.
Which is something that's a very Gandalf kind of situation where he will say things that he is making predictions, but what those predictions are don't always mean what he may have been thinking at the time. You know, his language to Frodo about judgment and mercy,
right,
is very clearly prophetic. But how much he knew about what direction that was going in,
how prophetic he knew it to be at the time. Yeah, Exactly. No, and that kind of thing is happening with Gandalf all the time. Now, of course, this is a Laurent, not Gandalf, and so not being incarnate yet, he wouldn't have the same restrictions as he does later on. But still, I agree that that's kind of a thing that we can kind of build off of there. So I'm just I'm thinking about, Marie says it was Brie Melvin's idea, the hope coming from the union of men with the Noldor. I'm kind of trying to think this through, like from Fingolfin's point of view. And one of the things that I keep coming back to is there a loophole in the Curse of Mandos, essentially? Right? Like the Noldor alone are doomed, right? Literally doomed, right? And you know, everything that they attempt is going to, like, they have good reason to think that no matter how the Noldor come together and team up and play nice and oppose Morgoth with everything they have, this is not going to pan out, right? I mean, Mandos has told them what is going to happen, and that it's always going to fail in various ways. So the idea that men offer hope, because men change the situation, right? Men were not part of that. The Noldor alone are definitely doomed to failure. There's no, you know, no reasonable person who is standing there when Mandos made that proclamation can really doubt that for long. Only you have to fool yourself, right? You have to kind of talk yourself into that pretty hard. But humans are different, right?
Yeah.
And they change the situation. And so by joining themselves with the humans, they're now in this is uncharted terrain, right? This is, you know, there is an uncertain future, which is a good sign, because it was certainly bad before, right? Now the future is at least less than 100% certainly catastrophically horrible.
Right. Well, let's think about where Mandos, I probably should say Namos. It's easier to do a possessive that way. Namos knowledge of the future comes from. It's not like some kind of weird, like, psychic thing he's got going on. He remembers the music. He remembers details about the music, right? And so, but the music doesn't impact humans the same way it impacts men. You know, like the text says that the music is as fate to everything but us, right? We change the math, right? We are outside of that. They have no, I mean, obviously, again, almost got Tour's measurements, so somehow that happened, right? But the music is not a good predictor of what's going to happen to us. Right?
Yes, things are going to arise unforeseen, and this happens more often with men than it does elsewhere. Yeah, exactly. And so that Fingolfin could derive, you know, that Laurent would impart, and Fingolfin could kind of dwell upon this idea, right? That there might be hope. And as Marie said, she said, I don't know that Fingolfin really believes in the long defeat yet. So he's definitely on the lookout for some loophole, some way around it, some way to think they can put off the inevitable indefinitely, or maybe even against the odds escape what seems to be the inevitable. And yes, I totally agree. As Ilana says, humans are an independent variable in this. Absolutely. So I think that's I really like this idea. I really like the idea of Fingolfin clinging to this idea. So we have Fingolfin, but now let's talk about the interaction between these two ideas. That is, there is hope in the union between men. The introduction of men into the equation changes the formula, right? Changes the equation. But true hope lies in the West, right? There isn't any real hope in Middle Earth yet, except unless maybe there is, right, in some way. So those two things are certainly in some kind of tension, right? I don't say that I think it's an inevitable contradiction, though easily it could sound like one, right? So how would a Laurent say this, you know, convey this to Fingolfin in a way that doesn't simply sound contradictory.
Well, here's the thing. I'm kind of okay with it being contradictory,
Okay.
right? Because Fingolfin's going to come out of this and go to the big push, which doesn't pan out. And
Right.
because it doesn't pan out, we know, right? We know that it's not part of Iluvatar's grand scheme, right? Because it doesn't happen, right?
Right.
And so, therefore, that's not what this was pushing him towards. Whether Laurent was pushing him towards it or not, it doesn't matter, right? Ultimately, this was not designed by Iluvatar to push him towards the big push, right?
Right.
Because that was never going to work, like on its own. Laurent just said, your true hope lies in the west. Now, Fingolfin might hear the words that your time is short. He might hear the idea of the time limit and realize, I have to do something now. Right. Even if my true hope lies in the west, like, even if that's the case, I have to do something. Right. And ultimately that also leads us into the duel, because like Morgoth just broke down the best that I could do. Like everything that I've built is lying in ruins. Like, imagine this is either an opportune time or an inopportune time to say this. Imagine that somebody brought Signum down irreparably, and also while doing that, killed a bunch of the people who were instrumental in you, creating that.
Yeah.
Like, I've had the work of my hands disintegrate in front of me, and it is, and you kind of feel like if I could confront the source of that and at least get in front of that, like maybe something could come of that, right?
Right.
So in a way, he's personally standing between Morgoth and everybody back there, right? I have to do something, right? I can't just let this happen unanswered. And that's what, and now that attitude can certainly change over the course of the duel. There are a number, like there's a whole arc to that can take place. But this is a good way to give motivation to both of those things. And the duel, in fact, is supposed to happen. We know that because it does happen.
It does happen.
It's what gets us to where we need to go, right? Whereas the big push probably would have landed them all getting slaughtered, right?
Right. So I think my other favorite thing about the dream here is your time is short. I love that. I love that because I love how it connects with everything that we've been doing all season long, right? The whole just difference between the perspective of the Eldar and the Edain, right? The way that human after human has been trying to help the elves to understand our time is short, right? And here's what that means. Like, these are the consequences of our lives being short, whether it's the House of Baor, right? Trying to say, we need to make something of ourselves now. We can't just wait for generations, because then we're wasting our lives and we're changing our people. Or whether it's even Haleth, right? Even Haleth leaving and going through Nandan Gortheb is also similarly like, we can't just wait here for you to think about what to say to us for 3 years. Like, our time is short. We're gonna go and make things of ourselves rather than just sitting. We can't sit around and wait like this. That Fingolfin should receive the message. The High King of the Noldor should receive the message. Your time and have to act on it. And of course, we've seen him. We've just been reminded of how he has been changed, right? How he has learned from men. And now this is like the final lesson, in a sense, that he has to learn from men. What happens when your time is short? What are you going to do when confronted by the fact that you have to see what to do, to contextualize it. And again, the problem is the Eldar rarely know that, right? They rarely know, even, I mean, it's often, in fact, true, like, slain they may be, right? So it's often going to be true that, particular Eldar have short times ahead of them, but they don't always know it, right? If Fingolfin is told your time is short, then that's going to affect the decisions that he's going to make. That's going to change how he's, and I love that. I love him consciously acting on that and thinking about that in the context of how, again, learning from the men, adapting to change. I think that's really neat, actually.
That also,
so Morgoth, yeah, Dave, go ahead.
It kind of, it also sort of changes the way his decision looks too. It's riding off to fight Morgoth and likely die doesn't seem suicidal if you kind of already know you're going to die anyway.
Right.
It doesn't, or at least it doesn't seem like stupidly suicidal. Like it seems like like you have to do something.
Right, exactly.
So it is kind of, that's a very nice little simple, like, I don't know, we should have thought of that twist earlier too. Like that really does sort of change the way you perceive his choice and his death.
Yeah.
Very clever, Nick.
Aslan's Compass on Twitch was saying something about a quote from, he says it's either Lewis or Chesterton talking about Virgil's fourth eclogue.
Eclogue, yeah.
About which has been interpreted as prophecy in various ways.
Yeah. It's the messianic eclogue, yeah.
Right, and how that he was. Aslan's Compass says, the quote says that he's right about the name, wrong about the significance. Like a man who picks jet to win a race, but then has his house destroyed by a jumbo jet.
Yeah, that's Chesterton, not Lewis.
Yeah.
But yes, that is Chesterton. But yes, it is about being right about the name, wrong about the significance, knowing the importance of something but not seeing the significance of it. I mean, Virgil was always the to back up a step, just to explain that. So in Virgil's fourth eclogue, he makes this like prophetic declaration of this person who's just been born, who is going to become a great person and is going to bring peace to the world and all these other grand things. And of course, this prophecy is being made right near the time of the birth of Christ. And so Christians, who of course loved Virgil, I mean, Virgil was the most read author throughout the entirety of the Middle Ages, they read this and they're like, Virgil knew. Like, I mean, because it sounds exactly, like, I mean, it fits perfectly with the messianic prophecies of the Old Testament. And so, so Virgil was held to have had, by many in the Middle Ages, held to have had some measure of actual prophetic insight that he somehow foresaw, even though he didn't know it, right? Even though he didn't understand it himself, the coming of the Christ child. Even in what was, I mean, presumably what he was actually writing about was like a puff piece for the children of like some of his rich patrons, right? Like, your kid is going to grow up and be awesome because you just gave me lots of money. It's probably what he actually meant, right, when he wrote that. Now, they knew this in the Middle Ages. They knew that was probably the case, right? But that's what Chesterton is talking about, right? That like he doesn't know what he's talking about, but he's right anyway, right? He's not fully getting it. But yeah, so Morgoth is not unassailable. That's part of a message that's delivered to Fingolfin by a Laurent in the dream, or is that a conclusion he draws?
No, that's something that Laurent says, and one of the reasons that we wanted to have those words used is that we're not sure that we're going to be actually able to put those words in Maedhros' mouth when he's
Mm-hmm.
planning his big push, right?
Mm-hmm.
And somebody's got to say that, right?
Right.
Mhm.
And I mean, we could say the same thing differently if we wanted to avoid just repeating that same phrase. But Fingolfin could conceivably, during his discussion of the big push, he could say it to Maedhros, and then Maedhros later repeats it,
Right.
recollecting, because you also have to remember that at the time of the Near Ninth, Maedhros may not know exactly what the duel with Morgoth looked like.
Mhm.
Right. Right.
Because while Thorondor brings Fingolfin's body and presumably the story of what happened that he observed to Turgon, Maedhros hasn't seen Turgon in a while.
Yes.
A couple of
Yes.
centuries. That's a couple of centuries
Right.
between not quite cousins.
Between elf lords. Yeah. Yeah. It's been a long weekend.
It's been
Yeah.
a hot minute.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, yeah. I so the Morgoth is not unassailable conclusion I love. I mean, I love that as the for the season to end there, right? For the season to end with simultaneously Morgoth is stronger than you have let yourself believe, right? And is going to crush you like bugs in this war. But at the same time, Morgoth is not unassailable, right?
Mhm.
Um, uh, there is no hope for victory in this war, and yet Morgoth is not unassailable, right? That's the kind of where we get at the end of the season, and I love that. I love that. So that Morgoth is not unassailable is essentially like the take home, right? The refrain, the thing that Fingolfin does accomplish is excellent. That he sets out on his ride in order to accomplish that, I think I love that actually. I think that's really good. Um, uh, so this way, when he gets on his horse, he's not getting on his horse in an act of despair. He's not throwing his life away. Because in doing that, he would be seeming to lead his people straight into death, right? Like, let me show you how useless all of this is kind of one way of characterizing the despair version, right, of Fingolfin's ride. If instead, basically, he's getting on his horse and saying, okay, that was horrible, but I've got your silver lining right here, right? Here it comes. Let me, Morgoth is not unassailable, and I'm going to go prove it. I think that is really interesting. And I think that can work really well. Here's the thing. The one thing I'm hesitating over, though. I'm not sure I love that as part explicitly of Olorin's message. I think I want him to come to Fingolfin to come to that conclusion.
Why would he come? Why would he come to that conclusion?
Right.
So there's a couple of things. One is Ringle, which he can have with him in the dream, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he could say to Lauren, but surely Morgoth is not unassailable, and leading Lauren to, he may not have to explicitly agree with him, but if he kind of like just gives him a knowing look or a smile, that might get us where we need to be there. Alternatively, alternatively, if our concern is the idea of that being something Laurent planned to say, it might be kind of interesting to have it almost be like an offhand remark at the tail end, where he's like about to walk away into nothingness or wherever he's going, right? And he turns to him and says, "But Morgoth is not unassailable."
Morgoth is not unassailable. Yeah.
Almost as if it just occurred to him to say that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a callback to kind of the way that that Laurent talks to him after his encounter, after Laurent travels to Autumno in season 1, episode 7, right?
Right.
And he comes back and he's reporting to Irma what took place there, and Laurent's like, it could have gone so much better, and Irma says, well, it could have been different, but it could
But
never
it
have been
couldn't have been
better.
better. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when Laurent questions it, like, what does that even mean? And Irma doesn't know what it means exactly, but he was moved to say it. So if
Mm-hmm.
we did it that way, would that kind of make you feel a little bit more comfortable with it? Or is it just a really deep desire to have Fingolfin arrive at that?
I'm just kind of thinking, I wouldn't want Fingolfin. I wouldn't want to make it look like Fingolfin is just kind of following orders from beginning to end. That's the thing. Like, if that final piece is an insight that he has, essentially, and I have two reasons to say this. First, like, I think what seems to me a slightly more kind of like I don't know, a slightly more Olorany sort of message, right? Is just like the true hope lies in the West and in the union of men with an Noldor, and your time is short. If those are the two things that are conveyed to him, like those two things can kind of operate, right? And Fingolfin needs to kind of find his way from there. Even your time is short and the siege won't last, right? He's got to find his way there, and it sets up, I think, the big push better, because basically this gives Fingolfin the opportunity to have a plan A and a plan B. Not plan A and plan B in the sense of a contingency plan, but like interpretation 1, right? My time is short. The siege will not last. True hope lies in the West and the union of with the men in Noldor. Okay, let's do the big push, right? Let's take the fight to Morgoth. Then that doesn't work out. That never ends up being able to happen, right? Instead, we get the Dagor Bragollach. Then again, instead of a moment where Fingolfin snaps and despairs, we have the moment where he says, okay, wait, I see. My time is short. The siege will not last. True hope lies in the West. But I, like these humans that I have come to admire and learn from, can see that even though I'm not going to take down Morgoth, that's not going to happen. I will not be overseeing the defeat of Morgoth and the triumph of the elves, but I can still accomplish something, right? I can. There is a worthy task within my measure that I can undertake, and that is, I can show everybody that Morgoth is not unassailable. We've set this up, is the other thing. We've set this up with his beating on the gates of Angband at the end of season 3, right?
Right. Yes.
He's already challenged Morgoth. And he's going to go back and he's going to do it again. We can even flash back to it if we need to at some point. You know, that awesome image right at the end of season 3 of Fingolfin walking away and planting his standard before the gates of Angband. He's already done it once before. And as you say, Nick, there's the Ringo connection as well. Like that he comes to the insight, and we can even make it I would rather have it be like a sort of a seed that Olorin plants, which doesn't really spring up out of the ground yet for a few episodes, right? In that moment when Fingolfin has this realization, it could be like, this is the final, like now he finally understands. This is what that dream meant. This is what the message meant. And so, because I think one of the things that I'm clinging to here, well, is that first of all, well, again, the biggest thing is, again, I don't want Fingolfin to feel like he's just following orders, right? Like, okay, now's the time when I'm supposed to throw my life away in order to accomplish this thing, right? I want that to be all him, to come from him. But secondarily, the other thing is, I want Morgoth is not unassailable to come from Fingolfin. I want him to be the first one to say it, right? I want that to be his insight, and because that's his legacy. Ultimately, in Middle Earth, that's his legacy, right? That's the thing that he's going to accomplish through his death, is to show and to prove that Morgoth is not unassailable. So I want him to be the origin of it, in a sense.
So what if Fingolfin says, surely he is not unassailable, and then Olorin stops and thinks about that, and then turns to him like right before he leaves and says, well, alone of the Valar, Morgoth knows fear. This is another line which we may or may not be able to work in, and it's a fantastic line, and I'd feel really bad about not putting it in.
That is a good line.
So giving a level of confirmation.
And that's much more seed planting than order delivering. Yeah.
Right. Because he doesn't have to know what, like, Olorin doesn't have to know where that's going. Right. For that to go where we need it to go. It's true. It gets us to the point of Fingolfin demanding that the Lord of the Black Land come forth, right?
Yes.
And it's not a direct confirmation. Like, it's not Olorin telling Fingolfin, yeah, you can totally take him.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, trust me. No, seriously, it's going to work out awesome. Just
right.
Yeah.
You got this.
Yeah. Or conversely, that that Monty Python sketch, World War II sketch, where like the pilot is told like that they need they need a heroic gesture, like, so please go out and fly to your death. That's also not what we want it to sound like from Olorin. Yeah. I like that. Alone of the Valar, he does not know fear. Or sorry, alone of the Valar, he does know fear. Yeah, exactly. So I was reading Morgoth is not unassailable at the same time that I said it, so I combined them tragically. Yeah. That's good. I like it. But Nick, do you see also what I mean? That how his first interpretation can be big push then, right? Yep. Time is short, siege won't last, let's go for broke, right? Is a perfectly...
And we're from the West, after all.
Right, exactly. Right. Well, and no, because it's the men thing, right? It's like it's the loophole, right? Like we've got, and again, it looks like, because I mean, even especially if you look at the shape of the season, right? It's one of those things like it would fit if it's even thinking of Hodor only, right? Hodor and his little, his little band of gallopers, right? Who came up, but anyway, so like the way in which they are now, like they're now instrumental, right? Now that we have the Edain with us now there's hope, right, where there wasn't before. So not only are they not a useless little strange funny little auxiliary band, they're like they're the hope of the Noldor, right? And it could, to people who don't know what's actually going to happen, right, that could feel like where the season is heading, right? To the triumphant ending. I mean, on some level, we want to have our viewers believe in the big push, right?
Yes.
Believe that that is in fact where the momentum of the season is taking us. That's where all of the stuff, the people of Beor are saying we need to leave Nargothrond because we need to go accomplish something, right? We need to
Yeah.
do something. And Hodor coming and let's move the people to the north and join with the Eldar because we can make a difference. And now all that's going to pay off, right, in Fingolfin's big push, and the siege
And
won't
then
last.
Maedhros is
Morgoth
gonna
knows fear.
And then Maedhros is going to come along and stomp over all over everybody's hopes and dreams, which is perfect.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
here's a healthy dose of reality and logic for you.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, it's cool. I think that this is it's not only an excellent kind of piece of misdirection on our part, but again, it makes sense. It makes sense that he would emerge from this and have that conclusion, right? And say like, okay, the big push.
Yeah.
But then later on, not only when the big push doesn't happen, but then also when Dagor Bragollach does instead, that he comes to his second, grimmer, but more accurate interpretation of the prophecy and of what was intended for him in the role that he in fact can play.
Yeah. Well, one thing that so our show has a major problem in that we are faithfully following a story that already exists, and so the meta of this is that people who are really into the show are gonna start looking up. They're gonna start Googling things, and they're gonna find out exactly what's gonna happen, right? If they're really invested. Like the people who are just casually watching, that's not going to happen. But the people who are sitting there scratching their heads trying to figure out what's going on with Wanda Maximoff and Vision, those people are going to come to conclusions about what's going to happen pretty quick. But that means that they're learning about the Silmarillion, and that's awesome. And if we can accomplish that, that is still a win.
There you go. That's it. Absolutely.
And our make-believe audience for our make-believe show.
That's it. Yeah. No, it's fun to think about our make-believe audience for our make-believe show. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, so this is good. I think I'm fine. I'm fine with this. As I said,
I had a suspicion that if you were really upset by it, you would have told us by now.
Yeah. No, look, in some ways, I think it's good. If I had been more involved with the discussions at the beginning, I'd have pushed back against the pushback at that point. Right. Yeah. Because again, I don't accept the premises of the pushback against the original idea.
I don't accept the premise that the Fey mindset is doesn't work. So we're on the same page.
Right.
Right. And alternatively, I wasn't around during the discussion in session 10 when all this got to where it was. So,
Right. Yeah. So, but anyway, not having missed that initial discussion and instead just coming in, or not initial discussion, second discussion, and then coming in instead at the solution that you guys have offered instead. I think this is really elegant. I really like it. I think that, there are many things that it accomplishes really positively, but most particularly, I love how it fits into the shape of the season. I have come to be extremely enamored of the arc that we're giving Fingolfin. I didn't have such a clear idea of the arc of Fingolfin in this, and I will admit, actually, when you guys started bringing Fingolfin in back in episode 2 and or 3 with Beor, right, and stuff at the beginning, I was like, okay, I didn't see where that was headed right away, but that was good.
What do you mean?
It was excellent. I know. I love the way that has come about, especially since the way that he serves as the kind of opposite number to Finrod, right? The kind of Fin, and we had them coming together at the end. It was Finrod who introduced Fingolfin to humans, right? And started the whole thing going. It was Finrod's pet project that Fingolfin started off with. But then to show how the two of them have kind of grown separately, and of course Finrod is going to be kind of coming around a little bit towards him in the next episode,
and will in fact make some very similar choices.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it's really cool. And of course, we always knew we were building up to, with Finrod, we were building up to the Athrobeth and Barahir, right? We knew that was where Finrod's trajectory was going. And of course, we always knew where Fingolfin was going to end up. But I love the way I did not anticipate how skillfully Fingolfin's arc leading up to the battle with Morgoth was going to be interwoven with the humans, but I think it's been done extraordinarily well.
Yeah, there's been a lot of hard work on the part of quite a few people. Everybody involved in the script team has had a hand in crafting that. I think the original idea of having Fingolfin Fingolfin reacting to stuff from Beor was Rhiannon's back back early in the season,
right
and Marie's been working tirelessly on finding ways to like have we missed Fingolfin recently,
right. Yeah. No, that's excellent. Yeah, I know. And so many wonderful ideas Rhiannon has had, and that's great. And yeah, this is watching this grow has been delightful. It's one of the things that I really enjoy about this project. I love doing the brainstorming at the beginning, like we did it, the first part of the season, and then to kind of come back around and see how the unexpected branches that the tree has been throwing out since it was planted, back at the beginning is really fun, and I really enjoy this part on it. So no, that's great. I think it works. And the Oloran thing, Marie said Hakon was the one who was pushing hardest for Oloran's presence.
Yes, Marie is also being somewhat humble in the fact that she was the one who first suggested it.
Okay.
But Hakon and Florian, I think, were kind of instrumental in kind of fleshing out what that looks like, or what that would feel like anyway.
Right.
And how that would be different than, for example, Olmo, because Olmo's kind of a big hammer,
Right.
like whereas Lauren is kind of a subtler, and that's kind of what we were trying to do here. Is we were trying to go along with the direction that you guys had given us, and make a little subtle, like add a little subtlety, and have there be a progression over the course of the season in this direction. Because I think that when you guys are thinking a lot of this stuff through in the beginning of the season, every issue that you're confronting is something that needs to be solved by a single decision, and which a lot of times is true, and it's a lot easier when you're going episode by episode and talking through those episodes in detail,
and the story is growing organically as you go,
to start to build that up in a particular direction. So
no, that's great. Thinking it through might be a generous description of what we do at the beginning.
We need to think. We discussed the issue. Through might be kind of ambitious, perhaps. It's not that we get to the end,
I recently started going back and listening to like older, like the very first sessions of the Silm Film sector of the Tolkien Professor podcast, and I'm astounded by how young Dave's voice sounds. I was like, oh my gosh, he sounds like a little kid. What is happening? And secondly, like you guys were having so much fun, and it was so inspiring that it was impossible while listening to that to not get excited about getting involved in this. So
Yeah.
glad
Yeah.
to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, great. Brian was just touching on the very last thing I wanted to touch on here. That is, of course, there's another opportunity, but of course also responsibility that we have in bringing a Lauren is that this story also then has to be part of the long-term development of a Lauren's character as well, right? We have to think about the role, not only the role that he has played here, but he's not, a Lauren, least of all of the Maiar is not going to be somebody who's just like flitting in, playing a little role and then leaving, right, and disappearing. This is going to be part of the long-term story of Aloran. So Brian was just saying that the thing he liked best about Aloran was the aftermath, how this informs his later line of even the very wise cannot see all ends. Yeah, thinking about how does this play into, I mean, ultimately, we need to be playing the long game and thinking about Gandalf's own calling and Gandalf's own role and what he's going to be doing as, a wizard in Middle-earth with the defeat of Sauron. But also, of course, and more immediately than that even, this is all going to be building up towards Olorin's choice to volunteer for that job, right? And so looking at how he is already involved and how he has been involving himself, why he's a good choice to be, one of the Astari, and why in the end, even if reluctantly, according to one version of it, he volunteers, is important. And I like this. I mean, I think that we can see the kinds of, the Olorin's presence invites the parallels, right? Invites the comparisons with the War of the Ring. And I think, Brian says it makes it very clear why he might be reluctant. Yes, I agree. I agree.
That's true. It's his reaction at the end of all this. Oh, oops.
Yeah, oops, exactly. As Marie says, we wanted Aloran not to foresee the duel and so be taken by surprise that Fingolfin responds this way, right? Exactly, like, oh, yeah, did I just kill Fingolfin there with my little visitation? Not what I had in mind there. Yeah.
And Aloran's journey is going to be a really interesting one, and again, it goes back to that episode back in season 1, and I don't remember whose idea it was to have Aloran and the person who will one day be known as Saruman and Myron. Corman, thank you. They're along for the ride on that, and to see their responses to Manwë's attempt to make peace with his brother. And that takes us all the way down to Lord of the Rings. And I think that whoever his idea that was, I hope it wasn't mine, because I think it's great, and I don't like to say that about my own idea.
No, it's perfectly, again, it's one of the nice things about being forgetful is that, like, when you come across an idea that you had a long time ago and you don't remember coming up with it, it's much easier to be like objectively excited about it. Be like, that's a good idea, because that's not because you can separate it from, gosh, I'm brilliant, aren't I? And instead just kind of enjoy the idea as if somebody else suggested it, because as far as you remember, somebody else might have done. So yeah, no, it's always fun. But cool. All right. Well, that was excellent. I think this is a great resolution. So we're moving towards right. The next session is not going to be the next episode. We're going to be doing post-production stuff. We're going to be talking about sets, props, and locations. So definitely wanted to prompt people, if you go to forums.signumuniversity.org, you go to the Silm Film project set season 5, and then you can go there. We'll see discussion places where you can suggest ideas, concepts, drawings, illustrations, photos. that would be really awesome. We're going to talk about all those things next time. And our next session is on Thursday, August 12th at 10 p.m. Eastern time, as we wind down towards the eventual end of season 5. You realize, of course, since we've already been planning that we're going to have to do like 20-25 seasons, if we end up taking 2 calendar years on every season from here on out, we're really setting a sharp challenge for ourselves moving forward. But that's all right. It's okay. It's all about the long haul here. As is my new slogan, life is too short to go quickly. So linger on it now, because you may never get another chance. So let's not let the opportunity pass by. So awesome.
I think that was also Fingolfin's slogan.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Yeah. That's it. Stephen is asking, does that include 4th age content? No, we were planning on ending the show with Sam getting on a boat, is I'm pretty sure where we were planning to end that. But exactly. Okay.
25
anyway,
seasons is still a conservative estimate.
It is a conservative, especially as we keep splitting them and everything. So I mean, originally I think we had roughly charted out 10 seasons to get to the War of Wrath, but that seems ridiculously optimistic at this point.
Yeah. Not gonna happen.
So yeah, I mean, we're getting to the Dagor Bragollach in 5. So yeah, that's all good. It's all good. Anyway, very good. So thank you everybody for joining us. Do log into the discussion forums there and make some suggestions. Love to have, you've been hearing about people who have been involved in this discussion along the way, as Bree was talking about. There's a whole bunch of us who have been involved in this for years already, but of course it's always delightful to have new folks coming in and contributing thoughts and suggestions. So if you've been listening for a while, or even if you're a new discoverer of the project, please do jump in and let us know what you think and make some suggestions. It's being a part of the active discussion is a really great element of the Silm Film experience. So I will say, in the meantime, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed. Okay, our sound is off the air.
Good, because it sounds like my baby monitor is starting to run out of batteries.
Oh dear.
Are you disappointed?
It's beeping in the background.
Are you disappointed that the way you guys did the dream sequence didn't provoke more protest? Turned out to be relatively uncontroversial. It's like, oh yeah, it's pretty good. We like it.
No, not at all. I figured if it were something that were really a major problem, that it would have been what we spent the entire last time talking about. So I figured that we were probably okay. And the reality is that we're talking about a lead up to one of the biggest events in the Silmarillion, one of the things that people imagine the most. And so, everybody has an idea in their head of what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, of course, now I'm trying to write it in a way that's going to satisfy all of those imaginings, right?
Yeah.
Which isn't going to happen. Like people, no matter what you do, people are going to be like, oh, that's just like, yeah, that's not really the way I was thinking of it, and they did this, and so you kind of have a little mercy on the guys who planned out the battle at the Black Gate, for not doing things the way that you would have done it. Maybe not so much mercy on the way that they did the Battle of the Five Armies.
Yeah. The Five the Armies. Yeah,
that was a little bit less excusable.
Yeah.
But
yeah. It sure was.
At least the Black Gate battle didn't fly in the face of all reason and logic.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yes, yes. Yeah. So that.
But I'm glad that you
But I
guys.
agree. There's a lot of pressure on it in that way. Yeah.
I'm glad that you guys at least enjoyed our version, whether or not it was the what you were looking for or hoping for. You know, like, and I'm glad that we didn't have to get into a huge fight about it for hours and hours on it.
As fun as that is.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think it's I think it's great. I really like it. I think it works really well. You know, again, few sort of tweaks as I was suggesting, but I think it's great. It's great.
I think that given the arc of the season itself, I think
Mhm.
that it works really well. As far as that goes, and I wanted to make sure that we got the vision in there.
Right.
Cause there was advocation for like, do we really even need the vision?
Just
It's
scrap it. Yeah.
Well, I don't think so, but I know that they really wanted it and they were really excited about it, and so I want to at least get some of that.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. No, I definitely realize that the pushback could have come in a much like more, I don't know what, forceful or violent way. One of the reasons why I sort of entered into the discussion prepared to be pleased, essentially, because I could see how much you were working to try to work with the framework that we had, to work
Right.
within the general framework that we established. And so I
Yes.
certainly I'm grateful for that and respect that. It would not have been as
Somewhere
much
along the
fun
way,
to kind of fight about
Marie
writing
and I
off an
became company reps. So, you know, like that's, like you become a company man and now you have to make it work, but you can't let your union buddies down. And so
Yes, exactly, exactly. It's actually a really good metaphor for you, Nick, like for your changing role, right? You used to just be the union rep who was fighting the power, and now you're a company man.
That's
But
right.
still with your deep union roots,
Yes, yeah.
and still accountable to the people.
I was thinking about, because like Marie kept saying things like, maybe, Nick would really be disappointed if he didn't get to like address these issues personally. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, but it's way more fun to disagree with me than it is to disagree with Marie. Like, that's just, I'm aware of the fact that that's just more enjoyable.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. No, there's no question about that. Yeah. No, that's perfectly fair. That's perfectly fair. All right. Well, I should let you guys go. It's late, but thanks everybody, and we'll be back in an actual honest 2 weeks now this time. So that's exciting, and yeah, and the next 2 week gap is exactly going to hurdle I'm going to be away for a protracted time.
Perfect.
My long road trip to and from North Dakota, but to take my son to school. But I will be, but I'll be back by that last Thursday. So, yeah.
Cool. Looking forward to it.
Take care,
Awesome.
guys.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Safe travels, Corey.
Thank you.